Years had passed since that first folding table and $30 espresso machine. I stood in the headquarters of our brand, looking at a wall map dotted with every cafe across the country. Over 200 locations, and still growing. It wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, crises, betrayals, and moments when I thought I'd fail. But each challenge taught me something about business, leadership, and resilience. I walked into one of our flagship cafes, greeted by familiar smiles, and saw a young barista teaching a new employee the proper way to steam milk. I remembered teaching the same way in my first tiny shop. The cycle of mentorship, community, and passion continued. Victor was beside me, smiling. "We did it," he said. "We did," I replied. The documentary aired nationally, and for the first time, I realized the impact we had, not just on the coffee industry, but on people's lives, communities, and dreams. Small-town hope had turned into a nationwide phenomenon. And as I sipped my own cappuccino, I knew one thing: no matter how big the empire, it was built on authenticity, hard work, and a little bit of courage to start small and dream big. The end. After the supplier crisis, everything started falling into place. Our cafes were not only back on track, they were thriving like never before. Customer loyalty skyrocketed, media attention grew, and franchisees were more motivated than ever. We reached a milestone I never imagined: 50 cafes across 12 states. For the first time, I could see our brand truly becoming a nationwide phenomenon. The financial reports were staggering: profit margins higher than I dreamed, merchandise sales booming, and investor interest peaking. Then came the unexpected twist: a major lifestyle network wanted to do a documentary on our journey. They followed me from town to town, capturing the story of a small-town dream turning into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Seeing our journey on camera, with employees and customers sharing their stories, hit me harder than any profit report ever could. Through all the chaos, sleepless nights, and tough decisions, I realized the truth. Success wasn't just about money. It was about community, authenticity, and staying true to the values that started it all, with a folding table, a garage sale espresso machine, and a dream. I couldn't help but smile. This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Just when things seemed to be going perfectly, disaster struck. One of our largest suppliers went bankrupt overnight, leaving dozens of cafes without coffee beans. Social media exploded with complaints, franchisees panicked, and customers started doubting the brand they loved. I felt like the ground was collapsing beneath me. Sleepless nights turned into days. I was constantly on calls, negotiating with alternative suppliers, and personally delivering beans to cafes in different states. Every mistake could cost us millions and ruin our reputation. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Victor reminded me of something crucial. "You built this from the ground up. You're not just managing a company, you're managing trust. Don't lose that." We moved fast. Alternative suppliers were secured, emergency training was sent out to every cafe, and I personally made appearances in the most affected locations. The staff and community rallied around us. Customers appreciated the transparency, franchisees followed the protocols, and slowly, but surely, we stabilized. It was exhausting, terrifying, and absolutely worth it. That crisis taught me that building a nationwide brand wasn't just about expansion. It was about leadership, resilience, and the ability to turn a disaster into an opportunity. Within a year, our cafes were popping up in multiple states. From Ohio to Indiana, Illinois to Michigan, each new location brought excitement and chaos. I traveled constantly, inspecting cafes, meeting franchisees, and troubleshooting problems I never imagined. The first big success came when a food magazine featured us as the most authentic coffee chain in America. Orders for branded merchandise and coffee beans skyrocketed. Investors who had previously doubted us now wanted in. But with success came new hurdles. Shipping delays caused some cafes to run out of signature beans. Training new staff quickly led to inconsistent customer experiences. Social media complaints poured in. I realized that scaling a brand nationally wasn't just about money, it was about maintaining trust. Then came a surprise twist. A group of former franchisees approached me with an offer to buy part of the business. They promised expansion funding, but their vision clashed with everything we stood for. Turning them down risked burning bridges, but saying yes could compromise our integrity. For the first time, I understood that running a nationwide brand wasn't just coffee and pastries, it was managing people, reputations, and tough decisions that could make or break us. One morning, I woke up to emails from journalists, bloggers, and even a TV producer. Somehow, my little coffee brand from a tiny Ohio town had caught national attention. They wanted interviews, features, and photo shoots. At first, it was exciting. I was thrilled to show the world what we built. But national attention brought new challenges. Competitors started calling us out, questioning our quality, and even trying to copy our branding. Investors reached out, some with serious offers, some with shady proposals. Then came a surprise twist: a celebrity chef wanted to collaborate. This could skyrocket our visibility, but it also meant risking the homegrown image that people loved. One wrong move and the community we built could feel betrayed. Victor and I spent sleepless nights negotiating. Every decision had consequences: which partnerships to take, which offers to refuse, how to scale without losing the soul of the cafes. Through it all, I realized one thing. Growth was messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises. But if I played it right, it could turn a small-town dream into a nationwide coffee empire. After days of pacing my tiny apartment and weighing every option, I called Victor back. I took a deep breath and said, "All right. Let's do it. But we do this my way. We keep the soul of the brand intact." Victor smiled. "Deal. You won't regret it." The next few months were a whirlwind. We implemented standardized recipes, training manuals, and quality control systems. Victor brought in tech solutions to track every cafe, monitor inventory, and even measure customer satisfaction. For the first time, I felt like I had control over the chaos. But it wasn't all smooth. One franchisee rebelled against the new systems. Another threatened to leave because they didn't want to follow stricter standards. I spent late nights mediating disputes, flying across states to keep everyone on board. Yet, despite the headaches, something incredible happened: revenues skyrocketed. People loved the consistent quality, the community vibe, and the little touches that made each cafe feel personal. Our brand began appearing in cities across the Midwest. And through all the chaos, I realized something: building a business wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something people could trust, rely on, and be proud of. That someone unexpected was a man named Victor. He walked into my original cafe one rainy afternoon, ordered a cappuccino, and sat down across from me like he already knew me. "Your brand is exploding," he said. "And if you keep running it like a mom and pop, it's going to crash." I didn't know whether to be offended or grateful. But then he slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal, detailed, professional, polished. He had 20 years of experience scaling franchises, from gyms to bakeries. He knew the legal, the operations, the quality control. And he wanted in. The catch? He wanted 25% of the company. It felt insane. I had built this from scratch. Every bean roasted, every cup poured, every sleepless night, it was mine. Handing over a quarter of it felt like betrayal. But Victor wasn't just some random suit. He'd done his homework. He knew my weaknesses better than I did. He laid out how we could standardize sourcing, create training programs, and roll out a digital system to track every cafe's performance in real time. Still, I told him I needed time. That night, I sat awake staring at the ceiling, torn between pride and survival. Because deep down, I knew the truth: if I didn't bring in help, my dream might turn into a nightmare. At first, franchising felt like magic. Money was flowing in, people were excited, and my brand was popping up in towns I'd never even visited. I thought I had it all figured out. But then reality hit. Hard. One of the new franchisees cut corners. Instead of using our fresh beans, he bought cheaper ones from a discount supplier. Customers noticed. They started posting online. "This place isn't as good as the original." My brand, the thing I'd worked so hard to protect, was suddenly under fire. Then another shop had a health inspection issue. Not because of me, but because the owner didn't follow basic cleaning standards. Still, the headlines didn't say, "Franchisee's fault." They said, "Coffee chain under scrutiny." I felt my stomach drop. If this spiraled, everything could collapse. I jumped into crisis mode. I started personally visiting every single cafe, sometimes driving 8 to 10 hours in one day. I sat down with owners, retrained staff, and even scrubbed counters myself just to prove a point. But I also realized I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed systems, standards, and a team. Otherwise, growth would crush me. And just as I was about to burn out completely, someone unexpected walked into my life with an offer that changed everything. When the first person asked me if they could open one of my cafes in their city, I laughed. "I'm just a guy with 2 coffee shops," I told her. But she was dead serious. She'd saved money for years, wanted to invest in something meaningful, and believed my brand was it. So, I started researching franchising. Legal documents, contracts, fees, it was overwhelming. I stayed up nights reading boring PDFs and watching YouTube videos about franchise law. At times, I felt like I was drowning. Finally, I hired a small-town lawyer who charged me half the usual rate just because he liked my coffee. Together, we drafted the first official franchise agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The teacher who first approached me signed on. A month later, she opened her cafe under my brand. I remember driving out to her town for opening day, expecting maybe a small crowd. Instead, there was a line around the block. The community showed up in force. And then came the surprise. A local newspaper wrote, "From small town to statewide phenomenon?" That headline spread. Soon my inbox was flooded. Veterans, firefighters, single moms, young couples, all asking if they could open one, too. It was exhilarating. But also terrifying. Because deep down, I had no idea how I was going to manage all this growth. After a week of sleepless nights, I called the investor back. My answer was short. "No deal." He was stunned. "Kid, I'm offering you the chance of a lifetime. Nobody says no to me." But I stood firm. Something in my gut told me that if I gave up control this early, my coffee shops would just turn into another soulless chain. That wasn't why I started this. At first, I thought I'd just ruined my one shot. But 2 weeks later, something crazy happened. A local journalist wrote an article about the small-town coffee guy who turned down big money to stay true to his dream. The story went viral, picked up by bigger outlets, even a morning TV show. Suddenly, I wasn't just the owner of 2 shops. I was the underdog entrepreneur standing up for authenticity. And then the unexpected twist, people started asking me how they could open one of my cafes in their own towns. Teachers, veterans, single moms, regular folks who believed in the brand because it felt real. I didn't have a clue how franchising worked. But at that moment, I realized, maybe I didn't need one rich investor. Maybe I needed a community of believers. That decision would change the scale of everything. Running 2 shops nearly broke me. I was working 16-hour days, juggling suppliers, hiring staff, and trying to keep up with payroll. I was exhausted, but the lines kept growing, and somehow both cafes were profitable. Then one evening, a man in a sharp suit came in. He didn't order coffee. He just sat, watched the flow of customers, and finally introduced himself. He was an investor from Columbus. "I've been hearing about your little coffee shops. You're onto something. I'll give you funding to expand, real funding. But I want 40% of the business." My jaw nearly hit the floor. On one hand, this was everything I dreamed of, actual money to grow beyond my tiny town. On the other hand, giving up almost half of what I'd built felt like selling my soul. I told him I needed time. That night, I called Henry, the old regular who'd always believed in me. He said something I'll never forget. Be careful. Money talks sweet, but sometimes it wants to own you. Don't build an empire just to become a slave in it. For days I wrestled with the decision. Expansion meant opportunity, but also risk, and maybe losing control of the very thing that made people love my shops in the first place. Finally, I made my choice. And that choice changed everything. A few months after surviving the chain coffee shop scare, something wild happened. A customer I barely knew walked in one morning, ordered a latte, and then casually dropped this. "Hey, I've got a vacant storefront in the next town over. Ever thought about opening a second location?" I nearly choked on my own coffee. I could barely keep the first shop running, machines breaking down, long hours, bills stacking up. Expanding felt impossible. But the guy explained that his family owned the property, and he'd give me ridiculously low rent if I took the risk. That night I couldn't sleep. Half of me thought, this is suicide. The other half whispered, what if this is how real businesses grow? So, I did it. I borrowed more money, patched together second-hand equipment, and opened the doors of Cafe Number 2 3 months later. The opening day was chaos. Lines out the door, I spilled 2 cappuccinos on myself, and the Wi-Fi crashed. But people loved it. And here's the craziest part. Having 2 shops didn't double my stress, it tripled it. But it also tripled my sense of possibility. Suddenly, I wasn't just a guy with a coffee shop. I was the owner of a brand. That was the first time the word franchise crept into my mind. For a few months, things were going surprisingly well. Too well, honestly. That's when the first real problem showed up: competition. A big coffee chain, yeah, that one, opened a brand new location just 3 blocks from my little shop. They had shiny furniture, expensive machines, and marketing I could never afford. Overnight, my sales dropped almost 40%. I panicked. I tried everything: new drinks, free samples, even live music on weekends. Still, the pressure was crushing me. Rent was overdue, bills piled up, and I started thinking maybe I'd made a huge mistake. Then something unexpected happened. One of my regular customers, an older guy named Henry, overheard me stressing about closing. The next day, he came back with a few friends, and they weren't just regulars, they were local business owners. They all told me the same thing. We'll support you. Don't give up. They started holding meetings in my cafe, bringing their friends, telling people in town not to go to the chain store. Word spread. Slowly, business came back. Henry pulled me aside one night and said, "You don't realize it yet, kid, but you've built more than a coffee shop. You've built a community. And people don't give that up for a corporate brand." That was the first time I truly believed this might be bigger than just coffee. After a few weekends of selling coffee from that folding table, people started asking me the same question. Why don't you open a real place? At first I laughed it off. I had no savings, no business plan, no idea what I was doing. But the idea stuck in my head. A couple weeks later, I spotted an old laundromat that had been shut down for months. The rent was dirt cheap because the landlord couldn't find anyone willing to fix it up. I signed the lease with money I didn't really have, borrowing from my mom, maxing out my credit card, and selling my old beat-up car. It felt insane. The first cafe wasn't fancy. Hand-painted sign, thrift store furniture, a counter I built out of plywood, and the same garage sale espresso machine. Honestly, I was embarrassed by how rough it looked. But when I opened the doors on day 1, there was a line of people waiting. That first month was chaos. Machines broke down, I ran out of beans twice, and I accidentally set off the fire alarm while trying to bake muffins in an ancient oven. But somehow, people loved it anyway. They said it felt real. The little coffee shop quickly became the hangout spot in town. Students studied there, old friends gathered, and strangers became regulars. I was exhausted, broke, and constantly stressed, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that mattered. So, this all started in the most unexpected way. I was 24, living in a tiny town in Ohio, broke, and honestly kind of hopeless. I had just lost my job at a hardware store and was drowning in bills. My biggest dream, at the time? Just to survive the month without getting another call from debt collectors. One day, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of cheap instant coffee, I thought, what if I just tried making real coffee? Like good coffee? I didn't have money, but I did have a beat-up old espresso machine I found at a garage sale. I started messing around with it, testing different beans I could order online in tiny batches. I gave samples to neighbors, and to my shock, people actually loved it. At first, it was nothing, just me selling cups of coffee from a folding table outside my apartment on Saturday mornings. But word spread fast in my small town. People kept coming back, asking if I'd be there next weekend. Then the local newspaper wrote a short piece about the guy selling the best coffee on Main Street. That little spark, that folding table and a $30 espresso machine, was the beginning of something I never could have imagined.